Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development, I've been creating a series of video presentations for the AWD 1111 or .NET Framework with Web Databases class. These presentations are based off of the textbook that will be used for the class for the fall 2019 semester. That book, is shown on screen here, is ProASP.NET MVC 5, an APRES text by Mr. Adam Freeman. We are currently in Chapter 14 of 27, and I'm talking about defining default values. And I mentioned at the end of the previous lecture that we have used default values in the past, typically under the confines of putting in a default value for a parameter for a C# method or function. As an example, if I am creating an application for Rankin Technical College and I decide that I want the state to default to Missouri, I might do that, and the reason I might want it to default to Missouri is 99% plus probably of Rankin students are from Missouri, or live in Missouri, I should say. Alright. A default value, it says, is applied when the URL does not contain a segment that can be matched to the value. So there are some examples here. It says default values, and here action is defined as a default value. They're supplied as properties in an anonymous type. So here we provided the default value index. So let's try to grab this. Let's bring it into our project here, and where we had this routes map here that we had in there, let's, for now, let's comment that out, and let's put this one in. I like to break my routes up like the author has shown it here. You don't have to do this, but to me it does make it a lot easier to work with and look at. Notice we have not put the titles in. Alright, we will get to that later. But now notice the difference. I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to run the program again. We have no segments here, none. But it's grabbing the default stuff, so to speak. Alright, it's grabbing action, and it's smart enough to know that it's indexed. And if you say, I don't understand smart enough, well, notice if I come in here and change this to just admin, finds the admin index because that's the default. If I change it to customer, doesn't find it. Was it customers? I'm sorry. Oh, because I'm still under admin. Finds that as well. All right. This is really dry stuff that we're probably not even going to go over in class, or if we do, it'll be for part of a period. I'm doing this because to try to be true to the textbook, I'm trying to go through as much of every chapter as I can. All right. So, as mentioned here on page 382, default values are supplied as properties in an anonymous type. It says, now that we have provided a default value, it will also match single segment URLs. I already showed you that. So it matches home, it matched admin, it matched customer. The author says we can go further here and define URLs that do not contain any segments, such as this. So by putting in something like this, we have created a route that will match a URL with 0, 1, or 2 segments. Mine worked with just putting it in the way they showed it. I guess I'm not totally sure why, but it did anyway. So notice all of these work now, but this one does not, because we don't have anything with 1, 2, 3 segments in it. The fewer segments received in the incoming URL, the more we have to rely on default values. Makes sense? It says you can see the effect of the default values by running the example app again. You've already seen it. Again, I'm skipping the unit test, which takes up half of page 383, and I'm jumping down to the bottom of the page here. Not all of the segments in a URL pattern need to be variables. We can also create patterns that have what are referred to as static segments. It says, suppose that I want to match a URL like this to support URLs prefixed with the word public. I got to watch it because if I click this, this actually is a URL. It's going to try to go out there. So if we want to do this, we can do so by prefixing with public. So notice that's this right here. The new pattern, as it says, will not only match URLs with 1, 2, 3 segments, it will only do it though if that first segment is the word public. The other 2 segments can contain virtually anything. We can also create URL patterns, as mentioned here on the bottom half of page 384, that contain both static and variable elements. And that's what they're showing here. Very similar to what we just looked at. So the pattern that is right here, down towards the bottom of the page, that's now in blue, it matches any 2 segments where the first segment starts with the letter X. All right, so notice the difference is here we've got public slash, here we've got X, so the controller name would have to start with X. Kind of a different example, but it is showing it to you. So if we did that, we have to navigate to X, home index. All right, middle of page 385 starts talking about route ordering. And the author mentions, in listing 1512, we defined a new route and placed it before all the others. We did this because routes are applied in the order in which they appear in the route collection object. In English, what that means is, if we have in here, if we have 6 different routes listed, as soon as the system finds a match, it goes and uses that route. So if it finds a match here, even if we'd also match it here, it'll never get there. It'll just go from right here. So you want to put the most specific route before the more general route, because if you didn't, it would always find the general one rather. And the author says here, again, I'm on page 385, the route system tries to match an incoming URL against the URL pattern of the route that was defined first. Proceeds to the next match only if there is no match. The routes then are tried in sequence until either a match is found or the routes have been exhausted. Again, the result of this is the most specific routes must be defined first. We already mentioned that. We can combine static URL segments and default values to create an alias. So the author is showing here how we can do this. We look at the example here again that is partway down, halfway down, on page 386. And the author says that the route that was added matches any 2-segment URL where the first segment is shop. 2 segments. All right. First segment must be shop, and the default, so if we only list 1 segment, will be home. Or the default controller will be home. The action value is taken from the second URL segment. The pattern does not contain a variable segment for the controller, so the default name will be used. So even if we put in here shop index, it's still going to go to the home. As mentioned here on page 387, we can take this even one step further and create aliases for action methods that have been refactored and are no longer present to the controller. To do this, we create a static URL and provide the controller and action values as defaults. There's the static URL, all right, and there's the default controller and the default index. The author says, note again that I have placed the new route so it is defined first. This is because it's more specific than the ones that follow. We're again going to skip the unit test on 387 to the top of page 388. Let's go through this next section in this video, defining custom segment values. And as the author says here, the controller and action segment variables have special meaning to the MVC framework. Obviously, they correspond to the controller and action method used to service the request. But these are only the built-in segment variables. We can also define our own. That's what's happening right here. And as the author mentions, the route's URL pattern defines the standard controller and action variables as well as a custom variable called ID. So this route will match any 0 segment, 1 segment, 2 segment, or 3 segment URL, where the third segment will be assigned to the ID variable. And in many ways, this is in my humble opinion, in many ways when you go through this, it makes sense. All right, because much of what MVC is about is a routing mechanism. So the author gives another example here on page 389, where he says, this method obtains the value of the custom variable in the route URL pattern and passes it to the view using the view bank. To create the view for the action method, we'd have to create a view's home folder and right-click on it and add the stuff that's shown there. We can do that. We want to choose Add, New Item, and what we want in here is, under MVC I believe, we want MVC5 View Page Razor from the pop-up, so right here. And we want to call this custom variable .cshtml. All right. And we want to change the code that goes in there so that it is this code that is shown right here in figure 1517 on the bottom of page 389. All right, so we've changed that accordingly. The key takeaway, the key change is this here. Let's do our file save all before we do anything. To see the effect, start the application and navigate over to the URL where we are right here, /home/custom variable /hello. Well, we're getting an error. Oh, I've got customer variable instead of custom variable. Let's try that. Still says that it can't be found. Did I call that thing correct? I called it customer variable. So let's do this. stop the run. First thing I want to do is File, Save All. Next thing I want to do is come in here and change this name. So I want to rename this to Custom Variable instead of Customer Variable. Okay, let's try to run it again. /home/custom variable /hello. Home custom variable hello. Well, let's look and make sure I defined it correctly. Home custom variable. That does look correct to me. Views home. Oh, I know what I did not do. And that is on page 388. I did not go into my home controller, which I must do. That's where the error is. So let's go into the home controller, and we have to come in here and we have to add what is shown on page 388, which is this. We have not given it any method call inside of here. Okay? Since we never gave it a method call, it was never actually calling our method that was defined inside of the view. And you know what? I take that to be a good thing because I'm showing you an error condition. So now, home custom variable hello. There we go. And if we don't put any variable in there at all, okay, we could have provided a default, and I think they actually did that in the book, but I didn't here. All right, the bottom of page 390 in the text is yet another unit test, so I'm skipping that. And that goes to, I'm not sure where, I guess the bottom of the page. So, you can always tell where these end because the authors put a thick black line in there. Alright, I'm at 18 minutes. This is a good place to stop. I will pick it up again on page 391. Using custom variables as action parameters. Be back with that shortly.